Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Lifting Diverse Voices, a panel discussion with authors Talia Aikens-Nuñez, Lars Ortiz, and Dr. Artika Tyner, hosted by librarian and ReadWoke founder Cicely Lewis. I'm Lois Valentine, School and Library Marketing Director for Learner Publishing Group, and I'm so glad you joined us today to hear from three young adult nonfiction writers and the diverse voices they are bringing to teen audiences everywhere. Before I turn things over to our moderator, Cicely Lewis, I want to highlight some general information about our Zoom webinar. Our webinar is being recorded today, and we'll send out the link to the recording in a follow-up email to all who registered for today's event. We'll also provide a link in the email to download a certificate of participation should you need one for professional development tracking. We have auto-generated closed captioning enabled for this webinar. If you would prefer not to see the closed captioning at the bottom of your screen, click the live captioning button to turn it off. You can also access a Q&A panel by clicking that button at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions for one or several of our panelists, please type it in here. If we have time at the end of the webinar, we'll read these questions aloud and have our panelists respond. If we run out of time to respond to all the questions, we'll create a blog post with the panelists' responses and send out a link in a follow-up email. Please note that you can see the questions other people are asking in the Q&A panel. If you have the same question or would like a particular query to be addressed, please use the thumbs up button to upvote this item to be asked at the end of the session. We also have a chat feature for comments and feedback. Please note that abuse of any kind will not be tolerated, and anyone violating this policy will be immediately removed from the webinar. With that, I am pleased to turn the webinar over to our moderator, Cicely Lewis. Cicely is a high school librarian in Georgia. In 2017, she started the ReadWoke Challenge, which encourages people to read books that amplify diverse voices, provide information about groups that have been disenfranchised, share perspectives of people who have been underrepresented or oppressed, challenge social norms and disrupt the status quo, and encourage readers to take action in their community. Cicely was named the 2020 National Librarian of the Year by School Library Journal. Over the past few years, Cicely has partnered with Learner Publishing Group to create the ReadWoke Books line of nonfiction and fiction titles. She is the executive editor for this line, as well as an author of several of the titles. Welcome, Cicely, and thank you for moderating our webinar today.
Thank you so much, Lois. I'm so honored to be here moderating the Lifting Diverse Voices panel. And you are in for a very informative and powerful session. We're going to be discussing the importance of diversifying our collections, lifting up authentic voices and hidden figures in history, exposing prejudices, and inspiring readers to speak out against injustice. And the webinar will cover the author's expertise on their perspective, areas of study, and their writing, nonfiction books for teens, and the value of diverse voices contributing to these discussions. And we're also going to talk about some additional ways to engage teen readers with nonfiction. So I'm so excited to share three powerful books with you today. Let's meet our panelists. You ready to meet our panelists? Yeah. If you all will turn on your cameras. Hello, everyone. And first up, we have Talia Aikens-Nuñez, and she's passionate about sharing with young readers the little-known stories, accomplishments, and contributions of people of color from all throughout history. Aikens-Nuñez is the author of Men of the 65th, the Buccaneers of the Korean War, which tells the forgotten stories of the only Puerto Rican unit in the United States Army through soldiers' firsthand accounts of the Korean War, and she lives in Connecticut. Welcome, Talia. And next up, we have someone who I've worked with in the past, and I'm a huge fan of her work, Dr. Artika Tyner. She's a passionate educator, award-winning author, civil rights attorney, sought-after speaker, advocate for justice, and her new book, Reimagining Police, The Future of Public Safety, examines the history of law enforcement, the approaches to public safety, strategies to building a more just and inclusive society, and in this survey of policing and reform in the US. She lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she is also the founder of the Planting People, Growing Justice Leadership Institute. And last but definitely not least is Lars Ortiz. And he began his career like me, y'all, as an English teacher. Shout out to all the ELA teachers who are watching in Denver public schools. He now follows his passion of music and writing. And he is the author of, and I love this title, Walls and Welcome Mats, Immigration and the American Dream. And this book examines how immigration has shaped America. It humanizes the past and present challenges faced by immigrants and refugees, and it highlights the optimism that leads people to seek a better life in a new land. Lars also resides in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Puebla, Mexico. Welcome, Lars, Talia, and Dr. Artika Tyner. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And so, as I was looking through all of the books, all of these books have so many detailed research and the sources. It's just so full of information. Can you tell us about, and this question is for all of you, your research process while writing your book, and what was the most surprising thing that you learned throughout your research about the topic? And we'll start with you, Talia.
Sure, yes. Thank you so much for having us. And yes, it was a very long and extensive research process. I had to go research through the National Archives. I had to, of course, I had to interview former soldiers. And then, of course, the Library of Congress has a wealth of information about former soldiers and veterans with their firsthand accounts, and that was invaluable.
Thank you. And Lars, can you tell us about your research process? And well, I think Talia, you forgot to tell us what, before we go to Lars, you forgot to tell us what was the most surprising thing, or did you?
Yes. No. Well, there are a couple of surprising things. One was the archives were closed during COVID, so it was very hard to get in there. But I found out that there are actual researchers out there that could go in. So I had to hire a researcher to help me on that part of my journey. So it was surprising, but it was also really nice to know that even though there was that barrier, I could overcome it.
I love it. And Lars, tell us about your research process and the most surprising thing you learned throughout your research.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to say that public libraries and our librarians were my best friend as I researched the topic of immigration. I spent a lot of time in the library, and I loved every minute of it. And while not altogether surprising, I was astounded as to how hot a topic immigration has been since the founding of this country. So the political atmosphere of today and the perceptions of immigrants are nothing new. Every wave of immigrants has faced a backlash and a less than welcoming reception. So for example, from the influx of Germans and Irish in the 1800s, where help wanted signs ended with Irish need not apply, to the Chinese and Japanese waves in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They were subjected to physical harassment and vandalism of their shops. There were even political parties like the Know Nothings who rose to power on the basis of anti-immigrant fervor. And even laws were passed like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And the Latin American waves of the late 1900s have faced adversity as well and still do to this day. And so really immigrants have always faced a backlash and downright hostility. So today's attitudes about immigration were not as shocking, but it still saddened me that we haven't yet moved beyond them.
Thank you, Lars. That's a powerful point. And I think that goes back to, what we all have been talking about lately is how important it is to learn and read about history, because it can really help us with things that we're going through today. So thank you, Lars, for sharing your experience to your research. And Dr. Artika Tyner, I know you do tons of research. Could you tell us about your research process for this book and the most surprising thing you discovered?
Well, for this book, usually I'm researching pieces of history like the civil rights movement and unsung heroes and sheroes, but this was really about going throughout my archives. I'm a civil rights attorney by training. So when we talk about policing and public safety, that's my life. So I felt like, in addition, I should have negotiated some trauma sessions as I started to look back over some of the cases and where I've been and where we need to go. And that leads me to how I went about the journey. Beyond going through those archives, I went back and I met with police leaders, I met with community organizers, I met with families whose loved ones' lives were claimed as a result of officer deadly force encounters. Library Congress, all the pieces that I've heard, I would say I concur. So you can see we work hard to make sure we bring the best books to you. What surprised me the most is everyone that I talked to, especially in the general public, had an opinion about policing, but very few had an understanding of its history, from the Indian constables to the slave patrols. So dispelling a lot of myths and misconceptions.
And I definitely think this book is going to do that for a lot of people, and also really bring awareness to this topic. And Talia, many people, including myself, I'm going to be honest, I had never heard of the buccaneers of the Korean War. And I remember telling my coworkers about it, and they hadn't heard of it either. How did you learn about this amazing story, and what made you want to write about it?
So about 10 years ago, I was at a family function. My husband was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I was with his grandparents, and his grandfather showed me a medal. It was a replica of the Congressional Gold Medal that they were awarded in about 2013. The Buccaneers were awarded in 2013. And so he told me then about this rich history. And of course, like most people today, I, pick up my cell phone and I Google it. And I couldn't find many books on them. And more so because my husband's grandfather was a part of this history, I wanted my kids to know about it. And I couldn't find one book for kids about it. And so, of course, then I had to write it. And that's how it came to be.
I love parts of history that have been left out, like learning about them and sharing them with my students. I love it. And I think this book is going to be a great addition to that conversation. And Dr. Tyner, talking about my students and readers, empowering readers is something that I'm really big on with the Read Woke initiative. And it's so important. And it's a key theme in your work as well. What are some ways that you think teens can actively participate in discussions around police reform and contribute to stronger and safer communities?
And when I think about it, the initial step, and I'll admit my bias as an attorney, get a deeper understanding of the law. Pick up, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said, don't leave home without it, your pocket constitution. Learn about due process, explore what searches and seizures look like, cruel and unusual punishment. Once again, just like policing, these words are used, but I think it's important to read them, to explore them and see what they mean, because that way you can get an understanding of the hierarchy of the law. So the top level of the law, of course, is the US Constitution. But in addition to that, as young people start to think about some of the laws or policies that they want to see change, they have a solid foundation to see where we are and where we need to be. And in addition, I would say explore careers in public safety, whether it's in law, public health, in law enforcement. There is just a range of different opportunities. So I hope that this book is the impetus for young people to say, I can be a part of shaping the future of my community. And that's why I was very intentional of the words public safety being in the title, because that's a movement about the people.
Yes, I love it. And the language and vocabulary is so important. And that's what I tell my students. And I know we have a class watching today. You heard Dr. Tyner, get involved, know your rights. And this could be a career for you as well. And I know Lars, like myself, former teacher, you work with students. And one of the things that captures students is the title of the book. And so I posted about the session, and I posted a picture of me holding up the book, and one of the commenters said, oh, that book is so me. That title is so me. And so I was intrigued by the title of your book. And can you just explain how you came to select that title and how you feel that it represents the differing reactions Americans frequently have to immigrants?
Sure. Yeah. Walls and welcome mats. I guess the current reaction to immigrants from some is that they should stay out. And the best way to keep them out is to build a wall, a physical wall. And this strategy has been used by the Chinese and the Roman Empire thousands of years ago. And walls used to be effective at keeping some out, but then along came the ladder and the shovel and the saw and the airplane. And the fact is that the vast majority of immigrants, both documented and undocumented, arrived to this country by plane. So what's going on? I think the wall is more of a psychological device. Walls make people feel safe. Why do you want to feel safe? Because of what the backlash to immigration is truly about, which is fear of the other. And so the welcome mat in the title is what everyone hopes they encounter when they arrive. So here in this nation of immigrants, or some call it the beacon on the hill, the quote unquote American dream has been one of the most effective marketing slogans of all time. The American dream has drawn people to this nation for a very long time, and it will continue to draw people for as long as it continues to exist. So I thought Walls and Welcome Message kind of had just a nice beginning and ending and total opposites, but it represents exactly what's going on in this country right now.
Yes, total opposites. And that contradiction is just so, it's such a drawing point. And I think really a lot of students and educators are going to be able to relate to it. And another thing that really captures students' interest and really helps them understand nonfiction are images. And Talia, I noticed in your book that, you know, the images really, I found myself, even before I read, I flipped through and I just looked through the images of the book, and they're in black and white. And can you just tell us a little bit about your selection process for the images and how you hope they will help teens better understand the text?
Yeah, I really tried to, because it's a book about a military unit, I really wanted to personalize the stories so people understood the humans behind this unit. And so we wanted to get as many pictures as possible of soldiers doing the things that they were doing for this country in active war, doing formations, practicing drills, so that as in the book, as I go through the chronology of the unit, the reader can really see what is being described and explained to really personalize the story and make them feel almost in the story as they're reading it.
Love it. And I think this is, when we talk about research, you can see the pictures on the screen. This will really help bring the story home and really make it resonate with the students.
Yes, that was my goal. I wanted people to be able to see, as I explained through the book, you know, when they started and, you know, what it looked like in their practice drills in World War II, in the Korean War, all the way to the present, so that they felt like they were on that journey.
Okay. And I just cannot wait to hear the comments from you all. I hope you all are putting your questions in the chat box, because we're going to, you know, try to get to those later. So if you have questions about anything or comments, please put them in the chat. And Artika and Lars, you both have write about topics that are highly discussed and that many people have misconceptions about. What misconceptions do you hope to debunk with your book? And we can start with Dr. Artika Tyner.
I would say the greatest misconception is around use of force. You can have the debate even at my family dinner table when they see something in the news and they see the brutality. They're like, why didn't the officer do this or do that? Or why did the community respond like this or that? And the reality of it is, I hope that the book serves as an invitation for our youth to grapple with some of those questions, but also understand that the use of force and the continuum of force is something that people help to shape through laws and policies. So it's that question of Tamir Rice, 12-year-old boy loses his life within just a few seconds almost. And it goes from this idea and conception that the general public would have of, is there more time to talk? Is there a continuum? How does it play out? All those questions are worthy of exploration. And I hope through it, as an attorney, I help to bring those questions in a way that people can understand and engage. And that brings me to the next point. Community organizers often chant this, God voice, God power. So I hope that people can use their voice and start asking some of the questions. Is this the continuum of force that we want to use? Do we want to talk about abolishing the police, defunding the police, or even thinking about reimagining this whole conversation? So you have a whole chapter, chapter 4, that explores not just hashtags and words, but context, meaning, and actionable steps for change.
Use your power, use your voice. Love it. Lars?
Yeah, I think probably two of the biggest misconceptions about immigrants is that they're here to be a drain on government services or to be takers, and that they increase crime. But on the economy, the fact is that immigrants oftentimes take jobs that native-born Americans are unwilling or unable to do. So from service industry jobs that employers have trouble filling to jobs actually in the tech industry that not enough Americans are qualified for. Immigrants contribute to the economy with their hard work and by paying taxes. That's one that is very common. Yes, immigrants pay taxes, both documented and undocumented. Income tax, sales tax, property taxes, payroll tax, which contribute to the Social Security Fund. And even though undocumented immigrants may never be able to access Social Security, they added, for example, in 2016 alone, $13 billion to the fund. And then on crime, the truth is immigrants are far less likely to commit crimes than natural-born citizens. And the myth that immigrants bring crime has really been a rallying cry for anti-immigrant movements since the 1800s. I mentioned the know-nothings earlier, but we know that it's false. For example, El Paso, Texas, a city with one of the highest shares of immigrants in the country, is consistently named one of the safest cities to live in. So why do immigrants commit fewer crimes? Well, I think it definitely has to do with the fact that it's a dramatic and emotional decision to uproot your life and your family's lives. And so you tend to be more cautious about behavior that would put you in jeopardy. And it also might be that because immigrant communities tend to revitalize lower income neighborhoods with economic growth, as poverty rates go down, crime rates tend to go down as well. So those are two myths that I hope people read the book will be thoroughly debunked.
Powerful. I'm telling you that I know some older people that need to read this and get those myths debunked, because we hear some of these things and people tend to, when they read something in print, they think it's true. But I just love the way you both of you capture all of this information, and you put it in something that is accessible to our students so that we can really break down these misconceptions and educate people with the truth. And I love the way, Lars, how you continue to connect it back historically. And I think that further advocates why we need to learn history, and history is so important. And Talia, just on a little fun note, we're going to transition to something fun. Talking about the koki, the famous frog. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can correct me. Can you tell us about its importance to this story?
Yeah, so I really want the reader to get like a real feeling for the island of Puerto Rico. So even when I talk about military exercises, I go into detail about what the island feels like, the temperature, the trade winds. But so the coqui is like a uniquely Puerto Rican animal. Actually, it's a frog, but it does, they do happen to appear also in Hawaii and other parts of in the Virgin Islands. But if you've ever been to Puerto Rico, you will always hear like the melodic sound of the coqui in the background in the evening. And it always reminds you of the island. So one of the song that I used for my book trailer, of course, featured the coqui in it. So just to give you that feeling of, like I said, trying to personalize the story, the feeling of the men.
We have to share that book trailer so everybody can hear that. That's so cool. I love it. And Lars and Artika, as you advocate for a more harmonious future between the government and marginalized communities, what role do you see leaders, both within law enforcement and the broader society, playing in bringing about meaningful change? And we'll start with you, Lars, for this one.
Sure. Well, we need an understanding of what drives migration to this nation. So whether it's immigrants coming by boat or plane, or migrants seeking asylum and refugee status at the border, there needs to be an understanding of what causes people to come here. And in many cases, it's a complete lack of jobs and economic opportunity. If you can't provide dinner for your family most nights, ask yourself, to what lengths would you go to for your kids to have a better future and to have a full stomach? If your neighbors have been threatened or killed by gangs and you fear you might be next, ask yourself, what would you do to ensure the safety and security of your family? So in order to have a harmonious future, I think there needs to be compassion for what brings people to this country. And there are many things that leaders and the broader society can do besides compassion. For example, immigration laws are outdated and are not meeting our needs. And don't take it from me, the conservative business leaders to progressive community activists all say the laws should be updated. Congress has not acted because it's a deeply emotional and polarizing issue, but something has to be done. And for example, right now in the news, it's all over the recent influx of asylum seekers at the southern border. Instead of creating fear and chaos for political gain, we need to ask ourselves, why is this happening?
Exactly.
Our asylum laws are outdated, yes, but sometimes there's not a lot we can do when a country's government collapses. So like what we've seen in Venezuela and in Haiti. So instead of building a wall, maybe we should be helping these nations get back on their feet. And finally, so many of the people clamoring to enter this country right now are doing so to escape violence due to the drug trade. And where are these drugs headed? North. The United States is the largest consumer of illegal drugs on the planet. And this addiction is creating destruction up and down the hemisphere. So, want to fix the so-called border crisis? Then we need to ask ourselves as a nation why we have such an addiction crisis inside our borders.
Great information. I think we need you in Congress, Lars. That may be good. Wow. This is such I'm just getting a lot of information, and I know those of you who are watching, especially those with your classes, this is some great information, and I hope you all are capturing. And Artika, did you have anything to add on how to create this more harmonious future?
Of course. I mean, starting off with saying amen to Lars, covering
I
all
know,
the
right? That's what I
and the alignment is right there as we
Yes.
the question of Black Lives Matter. More than a hashtag or organization, I wrote this book because I saw how the issues of police violence, I saw how the issues of poverty, of despondency disproportionately impacts our community. And when I say our community, I'm talking about the Black community. And I know we see all these myths, so let me help people out a little bit. There's a myth that there's Black on Black crime. Let me help you out. False. There's no such thing. Crime is by proximity. If you don't believe me, do some research on sociology. You'll find that out right away. There's also this myth that Black people tend to have a higher rate of drug use. False as well. And when you think about the displacement in our communities, it's typically people coming in and responding and participating in drug trafficking, but it's also primarily external issue and not an internal issue. In addition to that, I've watched news broadcasters talk about how Black people are born with a gene of violence.
Hmm.
Who did it come from? My mother or my father? Which chromosome brought that in me? I mean, let's be serious for a moment. So I
Exactly.
hope that what this book can do is help us to do our homework, to see that these are historical constructs that divide us, when the opportunity of the true American dream is finding out about our shared humanity and common destiny. And how do we tap into that power? And a part of what I danced around, this was a book about public safety, but I danced around it in chapter 5, is that around public safety is a lingering issue called economic justice. And if you don't believe me, you can go back to the Kerner report. You can go back to even Abraham Lincoln's words about Reconstruction. If we look at our experience as African Americans, we're brought to America through slavery for the most part. I'm not denying the immigrant story, but my story is not that. For there are African immigrants, of course, but I am a descendant of slavery. That means that my experience is dramatically different. And if we're looking at how communities then have struggled to find jobs, access to housing, healthcare, all of those pieces contribute to the instability that challenge us in trying to build public safety in meaningful ways. So I hope the book can really dispel some of the myths and give folks homework. These things have already been discussed. I write this whole section about Malcolm X. We don't talk about this, but one of the things that really compelled Malcolm X into his work around racial justice is that the minister responded to an incident of police brutality. It ended up being one of the largest settlements around police brutality, around a gentleman by the name of, his last name was Hinton, who was brutally beaten by the police. And if you watch that movie, Malcolm X, you see it. And people were concerned. They were like, one man has this much power to move the whole crowd. But he demanded that Mr. Hinton receive medical services. Where am I going with all this? That in order to understand the present, we have to understand the past. And to understand public safety, we have to understand racial justice.
If we don't leave with anything today, remember Dr. Tyner said, do your homework, do the homework. And I think that's so powerful. And I love how you brought it back to history and how you went through each point. And I think that this is what these books can help us do when we have these conversations and we have people making these comments that are based out of falsehoods. Having a resource like this really can help to debunk those myths and really, really educate people. And thank you too for those powerful answers. Like I feel inspired. I feel inspired. And this leads me to my next question. We're talking about these amazing books and all these topics that kids need to know. How can you see these books being used in schools and libraries? Because we do have classes on here today. I know one class watching today from DeKalb County, and people are just checking in, and I see educators on the call. How do you see your book being used in a school or library? And we'll start with you, Talia.
I would personally like to see my book incorporated into US history class, because this is an important piece of history. And it's also an important piece of history to know so that we don't repeat. So for example, the Buccaneers, the men of the 65th Infantry Regiment, they were involved in one of the biggest evacuations from the Korean War. It was a point where the Marines were in trouble. The Chinese entered the war and they surrounded our forces. And so the Buccaneers, this was actually at a point when they were starting to desegregate the military. And at that point, they were allowing this group to go into combat, because in World War I and World War II, people of color could not have combat roles. They were relegated to support roles. So the men came in highly trained, very motivated, and rescued these other military people and brought them all to safety. They were the last ones to leave from that part of Korea. And, in keeping our troops safe. And then fast forward a few years, they were involved in one of the largest court-martial of the Korean War. And they were court-martialed for something that a white unit did, but they weren't court-martialed for. So all of this is to say that these pieces of history are so important for kids to learn, so that these types of the disparate treatment is not continued in the military or other realms of government today.
Thank you, Talia. And Lars, welcome
Yeah,
back. Lars and welcome, Matt. How do you see this being used? You're a former English teacher.
right. I could definitely see it being used in conjunction with assignments and research topics, research projects. Could also be used to help students write the history of their own immigration or arrival story in this country. Mostly, I want people to see themselves in these stories, because the fact is we're likely the most diverse nation in the history of the world. And it is a complicated history, as Dr. Tyner mentioned. Not everyone came here willingly. And we need to think about that. It is incredible, though, the most diverse nation in the history of the world. So with that come challenges, but this diversity can also be our strength. And while immigration can be a polarizing issue, it's also a story of hope, usually with bumps along the way, though. So I hope we start to see each other as human beings who are just trying to make it, instead of as threats trying to cause harm.
Yes.
I know fear is a powerful, very powerful feeling. And unfortunately, there are many who try to exploit it for their own gain. And I think hopefully by reading the book and getting to know each other's stories, and by understanding why and how it is that we're all neighbors here in this country, maybe, just maybe, we can learn to get along just a little better.
And Dr. Tyner?
I'll take this question as being a lifelong educator, law professor, science educator, and my dream was to become a high school English teacher. I didn't make it there. I pivoted and went to law school, but I take it in the sense of one of the doctrines that I followed was teaching in the moment, as a pedagogy on making sure that what young people were watching on the news or hearing in their discussions at the dinner table, that they had the practical tools to engage with the subject matter. These 3 books do that. Get them all, because
Yes.
as issues come up related to employment, related to immigration, related to disparities, if you're having all these conversations are happening everywhere, whether it's on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or just hearing whispers. Instead of young people feeling like they don't have the tools to learn how to engage in those conversations, now we've answered that challenge. They can go to a particular chapter in one of the books and find out how to engage and hopefully learn more about history in meaningful ways.
Powerful. I love it. Diversity and strength. And this book needs to be in US history. And I'm just taking some great notes, and really, really, this is just something that I'm taking back with me, because I'm in the school library right now, former English teacher. So definitely grateful for that answer. And I think somebody in one of the participants that's watching actually had that question. And so, well, this next question is something I saw in the chat, but it's something that we had talked about adding. What tips do you have for getting teens engaged in nonfiction? Because we know that if all the kids, they love to read fiction, but we do have those kids that love nonfiction. But how do we get kids excited about these books and get them engaged in these topics? Talia, we'll start with you for this one. Like I keep starting with you, Talia. I don't know.
I typically engage kids by talking about present day things, because I find when kids can see themselves there or can relate to it, then it kind of piques their interest. So typically when I'm talking to kids about men of the 65th, I'll talk about, depending upon the audience, I'll talk about things like, have you thought about going into the military, or have you been to Puerto Rico? Like, there are many different ways and to approach the topic, to talk to them so that they see themselves, and then kind of take it one step further, where you start to tell them a little bit more about history. And then there you have it. They learned something that they didn't expect to learn, that they're engaged with, and then opens the door for them to want to read more about it.
And Lars?
Yeah, I guess a salient memory I have from when I was in school was reading time. And in several of my English classes, we were just simply allowed to read a book of our choosing during class. And maybe that book could be a nonfiction book sometimes. And I know there's a lot of demands placed on teachers, and instructional time is precious, as we all know. But maybe the best way to engage students in reading is simply to help them build the habit in class whenever possible.
Okay, Dr. Tyner?
I share the same sentiments, ensuring that it's an opportunity to be timely and relevant. There's no denying that when you cut on the 10 o'clock news, that you're going to see something related to a public safety topic. So I hope that my book can serve as the guide to spark some of those conversations and help to lead to more critical moments. So I would say being timely and relevant is a key to my success as an educator over the past 2 decades.
Mm-hmm. And I like, you mentioned something earlier about what's on TikTok and what are they watching and connecting it to. I love that. And this is definitely something that we see on TikTok and we see on social media. And Dr. Tyner, you know, since you mentioned, I think you mentioned TikTok earlier, what's relevant and what they're watching and what they're learning. How would you, if you had to do a TikTok of 30 seconds, how would you sell your book in 30 seconds to get kids excited about reading your book? Because if you're a librarian on this call, or language arts teacher, history teacher, any educator, you know we got a small window of time to try to connect them and get them to get these books. So Dr. Tyner, what would you say in 30 seconds? I'm going to time you too.
This book, Reimagining Police, The Future of Public Safety, is an invitation to you to be able to hear your voice as young leaders who experience day-to-day life with policing, with challenges related to understanding and knowing your rights, and understanding history and context and culture. This is an invitation for you to learn, grow, and read, because you will get the tools today to take you from history of the past to the future and create change.
Wow, you had time left. And if you're an educator, you get this video as a recording, I suggest take these little snippets and make QR codes and put them next to these books so that the kids can hear the author's voice and get this book in the hands of kids. Okay, and Lars, you got 30 seconds. Sell it.
Almost everyone has an immigration story to tell, whether you moved here yesterday or your ancestors arrived hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Why did your family move to where you live? That can be a complicated and interesting answer. And when they arrived, did they encounter walls, trying to stop them and keep them out, or welcome mats, making them feel at home? And if you don't already know the answer to those questions, it might be worth investigating your roots. What is your immigration story?
Wow, 30 seconds exactly, Lars. You really are former language arts teachers. Because you know we have to eat lunch at like 20, you got 20 minutes to get everything done. So you did that. All right, Talia, are you ready?
I don't know.
Okay, go.
Oh, the timer's on. Okay. Did you ever know that there were portions of the military that were separated by the color of their skin? Did you ever know that these soldiers were treated differently? Did you ever know that these soldiers had to endure racism, prejudice, and the worst conditions to fight for your freedom? If you want to know more, pick up Men of the 65th, the Borinqueniers, the Korean War.
Wow, 31 point. I don't know if you can't see because it's blurry, but you guys are awesome. Wow. So I hope y'all take that. This is something great and a great way to get kids engaged, hearing the author's voice. Thank y'all. I'm sold. I don't know about you. And we all know that it's Banned Books Week this week, and book bannings are all over the news. According to PEN America, 30% of the unique titles banned are books about race, racism, or feature characters of color. And while your books, the books that we have discussed today, they feature diverse voices, they have not yet been challenged. What advice might you have for librarians and teachers to fight against book banning? And we'll start with you, Dr. Tyner.
I will answer with a quote.
Mm,
Malcolm X said that education is a passport for the future. It's a
mm,
sense that education belongs to those who prepare for it today. So when I think about books, they're integral to education. They go hand in hand, they're intertwined. So what I would look forward to is every young person having a passport of education, and the books are the visas that go inside. So for me, my life opened up as I went into the library. I was able to see the world before I traveled outside of my 1 mile radius of my community. I lived through the world. I understood history. I understood culture because of the power of books. So let's open up that passport. Let's make it readily available. And we know that's a charge and mission for us all of access, of accuracy, and of advocacy.
powerful answer. Lars?
Yeah, my friend Dana, I was just talking to her today, and she's a library director, and she has been recently facing a lot of book bans or calls for bans and actually threats to her job. And she told me about a great resource today, and it's a website. It's called uniteagainstbookbans.org, and it has a lot of great information, a lot of resources. So check that one out. And I'll also add that the backlash against immigrants is no different than the backlash against information and new knowledge that we're seeing. Those who would seek to ban information will never give up. And so we must also never give up.
That's right. And Talia?
Just to kind of piggyback off what Lars just said there, I thank all the teachers and librarians and school administrators and all those people for fighting this fight and understanding the importance of education for our kids. And, whatever support as authors we can provide, always reach out to us, because we are a resource, and we are also here for you in this fight with you.
Amazing information, amazing answers. This has been a treat, a lot of information, but I feel like this was so needed during Banned Books Week, and I'm just so honored that I was able to speak with you. And a big thanks to all of the authors for sharing about their books and just really giving us so much meaningful information that we can really take back into our schools and our communities. And thank you to everybody who turned in, every teacher. I see your names on the screen. Some of you I know, and I know the work that you're doing, school librarians and educators out there who are in the trenches doing the work. I applaud you. I'm with you. And thank you for sharing those resources. And there'll be more information that will be coming to you in an email. So add all of these books. Y'all see all of these books. I think Dr. Tyner said it earlier, get full of them. This is a complete set. You need to have these books in your school library, public library, classroom library, home library. These books are essential. And now I'll turn the discussion back over to Lois, who's going to handle the question and answer session. And I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. This was a great discussion. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. We had so many great ideas presented today, and just the bit about making these video clips into QR codes. We are going to work on that as soon as the recording is finished. So we'll try to get those out. I think that was a great idea. You all had such wonderful things to say, and we really thank you for the time and energy and passion you have for presenting today. It's wonderful. We didn't have too many extra questions, but let me just ask a couple. And the first one is actually for Cicely. And it's a two-parter. Cicely, during a previous panel, you mentioned a lesson using picture books to teach social justice through research. I would love to hear more about that. And then, can we integrate these wonderful books into a similar lesson?
Most definitely. I think it was the picture book session, and I'm a huge advocate for picture books for everyone. And basically, some of the picture books that we talked about were Unspeakable, which is about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and having these short, digestible texts that kids can get through the information very quickly, and they can actually own the information and then take it and produce different things. So one of the things that I use are the school databases. So all of our high schools, elementary and middle school, the students have access to these databases. So for example, if you take Men of the 65th, and like Talia said earlier, researching military, researching life in Puerto Rico, the Coqui or whatever, and connecting it back to the book. Those are great ways. One, you're getting kids reading the books. You're also exposing them to your databases, which I know we're really huge components of that. And then the research aspect, having them look at the source notes in the back of the book and being able to cite the book is something that's really important. And I hope that answers your question. If not, you can email me and I can send you any lesson information that I have.
That's fantastic, Cicely. Thank you so much. One of the questions in the chat was, can you explain the importance of Banned Book Week to my students? Cicely, as a librarian, do you want to take that one as well? What's the importance of Banned Books Weeks?
So when students come in the library and I have a banned book display, they're like, "Miss, is that book banned? And look, you have it here. Are you gonna, is that?" And I'm like, "No, let me explain that to you. That's the biggest question. A banned book list or a book that's on a banned book list, it might not be banned in your school, but it might have been challenged or it might have been banned anywhere in the world. If it has, then we add it to the banned book list. And what we do during Banned Book Week is we celebrate these books because we recognize that this is an attack on intellectual freedom. And so we're really celebrating intellectual freedom. That's what we're doing when we celebrate Banned Book Week. So there's so many books. If I told you, students who are listening, To Kill a Mockingbird, that's one of the books that many of you are probably required to read. The Color Purple, Are You There, God Is Me, Margaret, one of my favorite books. These are some of the books on the banned list that have been banned anywhere in the world. And so it's really, I know you're probably like, what? And my students are as well. If a book has been banned or challenged, we celebrate it because we're celebrating intellectual freedom.
Perfect. Did any of the other authors have anything to add? Okay. All right. One of the questions that just came in, do you have any additional books in the works, or what projects are you working on next? Why don't we start, Dr. Tyner?
Guess I should ask myself, what am I not working on?
True. You are one busy woman.
Writing has really been for me both a gift of healing and restoration at the same time. And so I'm currently working on some books related to the civil rights movement that looks at also the components of economic justice and gives just a different dimension on some of the organizers like A. Philip Randolph as well. But I'm a little slow on it. I didn't have enough coffee today. Can I respond to the banned books piece? Because it took me a moment to kind of process.
For sure.
I think it's another invitation to think about history. What was one of the first moves that you see in Germany related to the Third Reich and trying to take away this idea of understanding Jewish culture, history, and documenting that history? You see laws and books attacked. So I think you can't have this conversation without seeing some of the patterns of history. There's a great monument that I always go to see when I'm in DC that says the past is the prologue. We're seeing the same challenge today. So can we learn some of those lessons from history and to also foresee where this is headed to be able to move in a more positive direction, because history repeats itself unless we're on the anchor and bringing forth change.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Great.
I love that. Another way to look at history. I love that.
Yep. Yep. All right. Lars, do you want to talk about your additional books or next projects? Yeah,
well, I'm currently deciding on a topic for the next nonfiction book. So if anyone has any ideas, mention it in the chat. I'm open to it. I'm always looking for some good ideas. And in terms of fiction, I'm currently working on a TV series, finishing up a season of a TV series that I'm hoping to sell pretty soon here. And it has some topics related to migration and immigration. So I'm looking forward to getting that out there eventually.
Fantastic. We did have one thing in the chat that's interesting, and it actually connects to Talia's book. It was remember the 442nd, the all Japanese American unit in World War II, and when they couldn't figure out what to do with displaced Japanese American men. So another World War II look at how discrimination permeated the military at that time. So there you go, Lars.
All right.
Or
Thank you.
Talia. Talia, you want to tell us what you're working on next?
Sure. I'm actually working on two projects. One is I'm trying also like Lars, going to a different screen. I'm writing a screenplay about the men of the 65th. I think they deserve that type of spotlight. And so I'm working on that. And then I'm also working on another nonfiction book to teach kids the ins and outs of lobbying. There have been a lot of books on advocacy and how to make change, but not the specifics about how do you get that bill passed? How do you choose that bill? How do you read statutes so that you can add language, change language, and things like that? So that's the next nonfiction book I'm working on.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, we look so forward to all of these projects and great ideas. It's wonderful. And thank you, Cicely, for your wonderful moderating today. It's always such a joy to hear you and to see the connections that you make as a teacher and a librarian to these books as well. We are out of time then for the day. Thank you everyone for attending. You'll receive an email with a link to this recording, as well as links to more information about the featured books, Men of the 56th, Reimagining Police, and Walls and Welcome Mats. Learners' books are available for purchase from all major wholesalers, library distributors, and online vendors, as well as from our website, learnerbooks.com. You can also find additional diverse books from Learner at learnerbooks.com/diverse books. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your banned books week. Thank you very much. Yay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.